So recently, I've been getting a few requests to review a film called Nimona, and I'll be honest, hadn't ever heard of it before. And I was somewhat groaning inside at the prospect of having to sit down and watch something fresh when I already had a lot on my plate. I hadn't heard anything about it previously, and so I was going into this film completely and utterly blind. No knowledge as to the content, the quality, or the reception of the film. And within minutes I was hooked. My goodness, this film was just excellent in every single way. So good from start to finish. So gripping, so exciting, just fun all around, and big call, probably one of my favourite films, if not my favourite film that has released this year. And yeah, you can call that recency bias. I don't really care, this film slaps in every respect. I can't understate how unkeen I was to watch it at first. I was tired, I wanted to sleep, but I had to watch. And then suddenly I was just reinvigorated within literal seconds. In an era where I feel like films are losing their impact and interest for me, this is one in a million. Okay, so if you haven't seen it, watch it for one. It's on Netflix. And it is so good. And if you have watched it, I mean, how good was this film, right? Looking on places like Rotten Tomatoes, I'm legit surprised how few reviews and stuff there are for this film. Needs more love, like so much more love. Okay, so some brief spoilers now. The film tells the story of Ballister Boldheart, a newly appointed knight for the Institution, an order of knights descended from ancient heroes of a bygone era who are tasked with the protection of this sci-fi medieval fusion realm in which they inhabit. Ballister's knighthood is a symbol of a fresh start, as he's the first commoner to be allowed to join the order, as in he's the first new blood, as every other knight is descended directly from the OG knightly families. But the current queen, she's decided that everybody deserves a chance. However, at this ceremony, just as the world celebrates his triumph, his sword seemingly takes on a mind of its own and slays the queen, prompting his boyfriend and number one fan to cut off his arm out of instinct, with Ballister fleeing the scene and I guess building himself a robo-arm. Never really gets explained in the film as to how he gets this arm, because no one would do this surgery, they all know he's a criminal, right? It kind of just gets brushed over, but that's a minor quibble really. And so he finds himself in the company of a shapeshifter named Nimona, who declares him a kindred spirit and appoints herself as his sidekick. The two team up to clear his name and prove that he was framed by the director of the Institute, whilst also exploring Nimona's backstory as the original monster that had battled against Glorith, the first of the Knights, and the truth behind the rise of the Institute to begin with. There's a lot of emotion and humour along the way, with a big heroic sacrifice at the end, which cements Nimona as a hero to the people, and sees the downfall of Glorith's legacy, and the role of the Institute as the sole justice in this world, opening their world to exploration and adventure beyond the walls. And yeah, the synopsis, it doesn't do justice to this film whatsoever, but yeah, just watch it, you'll see. Anyway, moving on. Like I said, this film just fires on all cylinders, but of course, the main thing you need from this sort of film is the story, the script, the characters. Are they all good? And short answer is yes, but of course we want a bit of a longer answer than that. Okay, so the story itself, it's good, right? Don't get me wrong, it's very good, engaging, intriguing, but at the same time, that's not what I'm focused on. That's not what makes this film great. It's there, it's plotting in the background, and it gives the characters something to do and to talk about. But where this film actually triumphs is the characters and the themes and the dialogue. I mean, holy shit, the dialogue is so good. The characters, in particular Ballister and Nimona, are just so well written. They're flawed and they're quirky, but they're wholesome and lovable. They're interesting characters. There's no cardboard cutouts here. The characters all ooze personality. They're so charming, they're wholesome, they're funny. My god. I was expecting Ballister to be really dry. The straight man, as it were. The straight man. But he actually had so much humour to him as well. Not as much as Nimona, obviously, because she's the comedic heart of the film, and the emotional heart, really. And after all, those scenes do need some variety in them. If there's too funny characters, it would be too much. But really, he is also quite funny in a drier, more exasperated sort of way. He's like a long-suffering older brother or father type of character with a really unruly child. And of course, Nimona really is the star of the film. So dynamic and wacky and unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get from each scene. And the bond that the film manages to forge between these two characters, this wonky cross between father and child and siblings, is just adorable in every respect. And yeah, whilst we're on the topic of their personal dynamic, this feels like one of the few films in general, not just animation, but all films, that really accurately depicts how chaotic and fast-paced real human conversations can be. Like standard Hollywood fare would have you believe that people speak in expertly crafted monologues, patiently waiting their turn for their chance to speak, being clear and eloquent in their discourse. But here, a lot of the conversations are just pure chaos. They go at a million miles an hour, and then suddenly they turn on a dime. new thoughts, new ideas. It's crazy. And this is my experience of real organic conversations with friends and family, and even with random people. You can't really predict what's going to happen next because your brain's just going at random. You go with the flow, and it doesn't feel scripted because of that. And thus it feels more natural and exciting. And I really love that they managed to encapsulate that vibe so accurately. Moving on from that though, it wasn't all laughs with the characters either, because there's a lot of emotional depth to them. And a lot of emotional depth to the themes of the story that are being told. And you can actually apply a lot of different moral allegories to the story, but the big ones that came to mind for me were classism, specifically watching Ballister struggle as a commoner trying to earn acceptance as a knight, with the Institute and the director desperately trying to hold him back, hold him down, frame him for a crime. Which for me is an issue that does not get addressed nearly enough by the media in general. Classism is insane. It's not talked about really, but it feels more relevant than ever. And I think they really handled that issue quite well. And it felt quite accurate and true to life, where it's almost like the whole world gets immediately gaslit into thinking that a certain type of person is inherently superior simply because of their family ties, and therefore they deserve it more than somebody else. And how it's so easy for those that struggle against the system to just get swept away and turned on by the masses, as opposed to those who have more access to more resources and thus more propaganda. On top of that, I did find Nimona's arc as a pretty obvious parallel to many sorts of prejudice, but especially against gender identity and nonconformity, and I think it was handled in a really good way. Yeah, there's not much else to say about it. Just handled well, and in a way that makes sense and draws people in. And so yeah, the film just has really well-developed characters with strong arcs, interesting themes, and great dialogue. And what more could you want from your story, really? It was just so deeply funny and wholesome. The film just makes you want to smile the whole way through. It is great. On top of that, I really liked how they handled the gay leads. I love this new era where having gay men does not necessarily mean feminine men. There's no shame in having those sorts of characters, of course. But for a while there, it felt like that's all Hollywood could do. That they were so eager to just stuff them into a box. But here, not so much. They're warriors. And not only that, they're the two best warriors. And beyond that, being gay, being in a relationship with each other, it's just part of their story. Yes, they're in love. Yes, they're together and all of that, and it does form part of the story, but it doesn't frame the whole story around it to try and bring attention to it, to try and soapbox to show off how progressive the writers and filmmakers are. You could swap their story out with any different romantic relationship type, and it would function the same. Which in my opinion is one of the best forms of representation because it shows that it's normal. Take notes animation studios who advertise how woke they are only to underdeliver come crunch time. Pixar and Lightyear. This is how it's done, and it's how it should always be done unless it's the point of the film. Like real talk, how many characters in films' whole arc is simply being heterosexual? Not many. And so I feel like a lot of people fall into the trap of writing LGBT characters, or really any minority character, and only having that single aspect of their personality with no other depth. I feel like a new wave of this kind of content is improving that, but still a lot of the mainstream is lagging behind in that regard. But films like this, or similar shows, they do make the characters feel real, which is something I very much enjoyed. On top of that, I enjoyed the animation style quite a lot. It was really frantic and crazy. A lot of action and excitement. I don't know, the graphic style, it felt very unique compared to a lot of stuff we've seen before, at least compared to a lot of other stuff on the market, so to speak. Kind of makes me think of a video game, or like Dragon Booster, if anybody else remembers that show. And then finally, I guess we'll say there was pretty good voice acting, especially the leads, and especially Chloe Grace Moretz as Nimona. What the hell, who saw this coming? Such a great performance, filled with so much life. One of the best non-voice actor voice acting performances I've ever heard. And yeah, it's just a wonderful film, filled with great action, great excitement, and so much humor and heart. It's really leagues ahead of what most of the major studios have been releasing lately. This, to me, is a Spider-Verse or Puss in Boots 2-tier film, and you'll love to see it. I've never read the source material. I think it is based on source material, so no idea if there's room for a sequel, but if there is, I'd be all here for it. And even if there isn't, I don't care. Make another one, please. This is too good. Do not pass this up. And so yeah, that's it really. With all that being said, these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. If you've seen the film, did you like it? Hate it? What were the parts you liked? And what were the parts you didn't like? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.